Hello and welcome to the Series B podcast. I'm your host, Greg Pokricki. Your guest today is Andrew Goldner, co-founder and CEO of GrowthX, a go-to-market resource helping founders in rising cities like Buffalo. On this episode, Andrew discusses founding GrowthX, why sales is so critical to its mission, and how markets like Buffalo can better tell their story.
All right, Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Greg. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here with you and your community today.
So for the uninitiated, what is GrowthX?
So GrowthX is a venture platform and a sales coaching program for B2B founders. You know, at the end of the day, our mission is to help solve the sales problem. You know, how do we help B2B founders get to market and sell efficiently and win, especially in this age of AI?
And I know you've focused pretty specifically on ecosystems outside of the major tech hubs like Silicon Valley, like Boston, New York City. Why put your focus there on communities like Buffalo?
It's a great question. It's what we call a rising city, and it really has very little to do with the economic development statistics of the city and more to do with the founders' characteristics. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. In some ways, my definition of a great founder is someone who was raised right by their mama and paid attention in nursery school. It's about how the founders act, how they behave. Do they come to the conversation with a sense of entitlement? 100% of what we do is about helping. And it's hard to do that when you meet people that think they have all the answers already. And by the way, I'm not throwing the coasts underneath the bus there, but I am saying that I think a preponderance of the founders in those markets do tend to both behave differently, come to different problems in a different way, and try to solve them in a way that tends to put too much emphasis on venture and not enough emphasis on customers. And so when I look at rising cities like Buffalo or Rochester or the cities across Indiana, Birmingham, Alabama, Nashville, Tennessee, where I live, I'm finding founders that are solving a different set of problems. I think they're doing it more thoughtfully. They're doing it from the bottom up. They're business builders from the bottom up. They're lightly capitalizing to break even and raising capital once they're onto something that is scalable. And they bring a learn-it-all attitude, which is very different than a know-it-all attitude.
What benefits do you think those rising cities offer the founders, on the other hand, right? You detailed the ways in which good founders come from those cities, but what benefits do those cities offer to founders, either that are from there or, in our case, here in Buffalo, maybe through 43 North or some of the other programs that have chosen to move to Buffalo and locate their business here?
Yeah, well, listen, not every city, in fact, very few cities in America have made the decision that New York and Buffalo has with respect to what 43 North does. I think a lot of cities have tried to do that, but they've come up short. I think the way that Buffalo has done it has been unique, and I think the ROI really speaks for itself. I think outside of the place-based economic development decisions that a state, a city, or a region are making, really what happens when we engage and enable the founders that are from and are raised and went to school and are involved in the communities and live in the houses in the communities in which they're building their businesses. I think that's really what an ecosystem brings. We have a very firm belief at GrowthX, and that is that prosperity shouldn't require a change of address form. And I think for sure, and especially from a venture perspective, we can talk about the location arbitrage. We can talk about the relatively low cost basis of growing a startup in Buffalo versus Silicon Valley. And I think those things make sense. I also think that it's about focusing. I mean, I think what a lot of people misunderstand about the Valley, which is where I founded GrowthX 11 years ago, is that it can be very distracting. And it can be very hard for a founder to determine of the 100 things they could be doing daily outside of actually just growing their company and selling their product, which are the things that are actually going to be worth their time and deliver a good ROI in their time. And so while there may be more opportunity to see those things and meet those people and attend those events than there would be, let's say, relative to a place to Buffalo, I think the signal to noise ratio is way off in the valley relative to a Buffalo, where you've got a concentration of great people putting on great events and supporting companies.
Yeah. When you founded GrowthX, you mentioned 11 years ago, why focus so specifically on go-to-market and sales strategy, right? Like there's a lot of startup support organizations that exist and do great things and, maybe offer a lot or at least their website says that they do. But GrowthX pretty narrowly has this focus on go-to-market, sales strategy. Like what was the thought behind that?
Yeah, and you're definitely right about that. We are on our soapbox and we're preaching the gospel of go to market. We're beating that drum consistently now for nearly 11 years, and for me certainly long before I founded GrowthX. The reality is the startup organizations that you're referring to aren't working on sales. So not only is there a significant amount of additional help that didn't exist 11 years ago in just startup ecosystems in general, but while there is a significant amount more additional attention on the resources that founders need to succeed, there is not a relative increase in the amount that are focusing on sales. There is no profession of sales. I started out my career as a corporate lawyer. I'm a recovering lawyer. I couldn't practice my profession. In fact, I was, practiced in the state of New York. I was not allowed to practice my profession in New York until I went to a 3-year accredited school and sat for a 2-day mind-bending examination. And only then did the state of New York bless me and allow me to help you with your contract. Same thing with doctors, engineers, accountants. The list goes on and on. There literally is no profession of sales. I was just talking to a great investor on the phone before we started talking, and she was saying the same thing, right? Why is it that MBA programs like where she went, one of the best MBA programs in the country, literally doesn't even have a single credit bearing class on sales? And yet at any college in America, you can get a full accredited degree in computer science. And by the way, this is now the age of AI. Software ate the world 20 years ago when Mark Andreessen made that comment. AI is now eating software. The dirty underbelly, the underserved problem of sales is getting more challenging. And for rising city ecosystems, it's an economic development challenge. This is not just a polite cocktail party conversation on the coast. This is people's lives. This is wealth creation. This is job creation. And again, nobody's focused on this. There are, I think at the Kauffman Foundation's last count, over 5,000 so-called startup accelerators in the world. And all of them are teaching founders how to raise money from VCs and not make money from customers. And yet, empirically, it's shown that the number one reason why startups fail, 90% fail, and the number one reason why is failure to find product market fit. And so, Greg, I would ask you, imagine if in Buffalo, all of a sudden, wide swaths of the general public started dying of the common cold. I would think that there would be a mass amount of resources marshaled in favor of solving that problem. How would we allow so many people to die of a known curable thing? And yet, with sales and startups, it is an epidemic of the same proportion. Over 90% of the startups in Buffalo are failing from a known curable reason. Why aren't those resources being marshaled? So we're going to stay on this soapbox. We're going to keep beating this drum. We'd like more and more people to focus on it. But the problem is that nobody else is. And that's in part why we do it. When I founded GrowthX 11 years ago, the idea was twofold. One, reimagine how venture could be invested, not only how it could behave, but how it could create a thesis and how it could deploy capital, and do it through the lens of solving the biggest challenge that founders have, which is sales.
So we talked about the dichotomy between the coasts and some of these rising cities. Do you think startups in, tier 2 markets have an even bigger challenge when it comes to sales, right? Like they don't, in the valley, you might have 10 customers at the coffee shop that you're at, right? And I think there might be a little bit more of an uphill battle in some of these other markets. Do you think that what you're providing these startups makes even more sense just because of the market that they exist in?
It's a good question. I really haven't thought of that question before. As I reflect quickly now, for you, I don't know, if it does. I mean, I think what we have seen is that the challenge that B2B sellers are facing, the common mistakes that they are making are universal, regardless of the city in which they live. And by the way, that problem is equally as challenging in San Francisco and in New York City as it is in Buffalo and in Cleveland. But again, it's hard to help people who think they have all the answers. And it's also hard to win against a venture narrative that treats a founder, more like a goose to foie gras, where they're violently force feeding capital down the throats of founders and then asking them and pushing them to run grow at all cost experiments, knowing that most will fail, but the very few that succeed will return the fund. I think that's a model that works in some places, but for the vast majority of the places like where you and I live, that ends up causing a significant amount of damage. And again, what I'm not doing is cutting the legs off underneath the venture asset class. I've been a student of the venture asset class for 30 years. I'm a proud Kauffman fellow. I guess what I'm saying is that one size doesn't fit all. So in direct answer to your question, I don't know that the sales challenge is more acute in a rising city, but I think because rising cities have, generally speaking, less access to venture capital than the coasts, the problem isn't as easily masked. But the naked man is revealed when the tide recedes. And as venture has pulled back and the asset class has changed and AI has put building in the hands of everybody in the world, this problem is being revealed in a way that it hasn't been before.
So how does GrowthX take this soapbox stance that we just talked about and put it into action for startups? How do you help folks?
Well, we think about it programmatically. At the end of the day, what we wanted to do is to try to create an engineering approach to sales, a professional approach to sales, and do it in a style and with an energy and a language that everybody can pick up and understand. We come to sales not only having not been professionally educated on it, but we come with preconceived notions about it. And so we try to work at all those things at the same time. We run a 16-week program. It is a sales coaching program. You get assigned a certified professional B2B sales coach from our team, and they work with you programmatically in the weeds for 16 weeks. We have divided the go to market into 4 pillars, and you work with your coach on each of those pillars. The first pillar being, who do we want to get in front of? So we're not wasting our time getting in front of people that we ought not be talking to right now. Once we're in front of them, how do we best use messaging to earn that meeting? Once we've earned that meeting, how do we best run sales conversations to get to an efficient yes or no? Because no is the second best answer in sales. We just got to get there efficiently. And fourth, revenue management. How do we make sure that the whole time we're focusing on using our CRM and our tools and our systems in a way that allows us to push the revenue forward and pull back where we shouldn't be spending more time? So we have a systematic, framework-driven, programmatic approach to B2B sales that runs across those 4 pillars in 16 weeks. And we've just now, like everybody else, also built some AI-powered sales enablement, because surprisingly to many people, all of the most well-known large language models fail when it comes to B2B sales. That's because they've been trained in the same way that LLMs have been trained on everything else, access to the world's information, which is garbage when it comes to B2B sales. And so there's a lot of slop coming out of LLM with respect to sales, and it's taking B2B founders very fast in the wrong direction. And so we've built an AI tool that not only enables our founders to use an LLM in a way that actually helps them with B2B sales and doesn't just, mistake being busy for making progress or mistake activity for progress, but is also built in the way that we call coach in the loop. So it enables them to work with their coach even more effectively.
And in Western New York, here specifically, I saw that you announced a partnership with the Golisano Institute,
Yes.
which is opening their campus here in Buffalo this fall. They had an event last week or 2 weeks ago where a lot of us here in Buffalo got to see some of the construction progress, which is super exciting. And a lot of what they talked about at the podium at that event seems super well aligned to everything you've outlaid here. So it seems like a natural partnership. Can you take our audience through that marriage there?
Yeah, it really has been a natural partnership from hello to the present moment. We couldn't be more grateful to have a partner like Ian and the entire team at the Golisano Institute in Rochester, and now, of course, in Buffalo as well. So that 16-week program I referred to, we run as a national program 3 times a year. We invite roughly 15 to 20 companies to go through that 16-week program. But then we run a series of partner programs like the Golisano Partnership Program, where it's oftentimes place-based or it may be industry and sector specific. In the context of our partnership with Tom and the Institute, it's place-based, and obviously thinking about the counties in Western New York. It is an incredible marriage between what they're doing and what we're doing. I mean, everything I was talking about before on my soapbox about sales not being a profession and the fact that you can get a computer science degree and you can't even find a single credit-bearing course on sales, that's what they're solving. I mean, I think it was a natural partnership because Tom built his business based on the back of good old-fashioned sales and focusing everything around sales and revenue. And so, Tom was unsatisfied with what he was seeing coming out of typical traditional 4-year higher education, where it was academic and theory-based and not applied. Business and entrepreneurship that wasn't preparing students to actually sit in a seat and add value on day one, or be better prepared to start a company that can be as successful as Tom was and add the economic power that he has and the jobs that he has and the things that he's done. And so the fact that the Golisano Institute is so entirely focused on applied business, applied entrepreneurship, hands-on, reverse classroom, internship, co-op based, everything organized towards getting a job or being prepared to start your own company. And then, of course, part of the subject they teach is sales. They recognized that as part of the experience, they wanted to make sure that students there, because everything is applied and not theoretical, had a chance to get their hands dirty working in startups. Not that everything at the Golisano Institute is about working at a startup or getting a job at a startup, but that's a big part of it. Whether you want to do corporate innovation, whatever the case is, one part of what they're trying to do is give students the opportunity to understand what early stage company development looks like. And again, having it in a setting where it's all applied. And so running twice a year, solely selecting from the cohort of companies in Western New York, running our 16-week sales accelerator program. 15 companies are selected twice a year, and we're running it out of the Golisano Institute so that the students get access to see in real time what the startups are doing, how they're doing sales, what they're struggling with. And my team is also working directly with the students, especially those that raise their hand and signal an interest to want to potentially start their own company or apply what they're learning at the Institute to a job inside of an early stage company. And we've got now a formal process by which they're getting involved in the companies that are going through our program. And so we like to say that we're raising an army of salespeople. We're raising an army of market developers. The students become a force multiplier. So when a company in Western New York is accepted into the Revenue Accelerator at Golisano Institute, they get access to the expert sales coaching and our expert curriculum and system, and they also get the force multiplier of specifically trained students so that they get that benefit, and that experience turns into internships and full-time jobs. And ultimately, over time, what Western New York has is a community of experienced, professionally trained B2B salespeople, unlike any other ecosystem in the nation. And so, of course, we'll be doing the same thing in Buffalo. And part of the vision and the work that we're doing together is to incorporate our work even more deeply into the curriculum, and even come up with a certificated program and go to market so that people in the community can select into one of the only professional B2B sales certificated programs in the entire country. And not only do that again in a classroom, but do it in the context of the actual startups that are looking for growth help in Western New York.
One with GrowthX and Golisano specifically, like it leads to such incredible opportunity in our ecosystem. At that event I mentioned 2 weeks ago, we were celebrating a partnership struck between the Golisano Institute and Odoo, one of our fastest growing SaaS companies, to guarantee some internship slots and first round interviews for Golisano candidates. And so you can see the ways in which that flywheel starts to spin for early career talent into, what you're describing as some of those professional certificate opportunities, and create that real talent density for Western New York, and build like a
That's
regional
absolutely
advantage for
right.
Buffalo.
And AI is changing so much so quickly, and B2B sales is no different from everything else that's being affected. And so for companies like Odoo, AI is changing the cadence of B2B sales and the mechanics of B2B sales so drastically and quickly that it's hard for them to attract, retain, train, and remain upskilled and valid the workforce. And so the work we're doing with Golisano is all very much forward thinking. Everything we're doing is where the puck is going, not where it is. We're not teaching traditional models, with a human SDR in a seat. That's cold calling. And it's not just about how do I, how do I magnify the volume of what I'm doing with AI? No, it's understanding how AI is fundamentally changed the role of B2B sales, in part because of the way it has changed the professional life of the B2B buyer. We like to say that AI has commoditized competence. And in a world in which effort is no longer your differentiator as a B2B salesperson, how do you get in front of that person whose inbox, whose LinkedIn, whose front door, whose mail, whose conference time is now overcrowded in a way that it's never been before? Because AI makes all sounds very smart, because AI allows all of us to do things at scale instantaneously and near cost free. And so by equipping the Golisano students with what is the absolute latest understanding of the most effective way to efficiently grow a B2B business as a B2B seller, in part by real empathy for what it is to be a B2B buyer, I think that's something that we're very excited and proud to be a part of.
I want to end on a last question here, switching gears a little bit. Just in researching you and GrowthX for the podcast, I was scrolling through your LinkedIn, and you have such incredible experience kind of all across the board. You talked about being
Thank
a
you.
recovering lawyer.
Is that your nice way of saying I'm old?
That I would never, not at all. But recovering lawyer, and then your time as publisher of Reuters, which I thought was super interesting. And you partnered with people all across the globe, and in cities all across the globe. Through this podcast and Series B and the 43 North Foundation, we as an ecosystem have spent a ton of effort thinking about, like, how do we tell Buffalo's story, right? How do we magnify some of the good news that's going on here? And I was just curious, like, what your perspective would be on that from someone that spent time, in a newsroom, running a newsroom really across the globe. Like, how does Buffalo differentiate itself from a storytelling perspective?
Oh, it's such a great question. And it was something that I was so excited about. I had the privilege of being a judge, a semifinalist judge at last year's 43 North Finals. And I'm proud to say I'll be back this year for the same reason. And it was on stage at that event that I saw Dan and heard about Series B. And I think the event was still going on, and I was texting Colleen saying, "Hey, when everything calms down, I need to get it. I need to get an intro to Dan." Um, you know, honestly, what you and Dan and the team are doing is the first step. It's being intentional about it. It's putting the resource behind doing it intentionally and thoughtfully, and making sure that you're telling the story. I had the privilege of being the publisher of Reuters News. It's the best job I've ever had. Short of working for myself, it's absolutely the best job I've ever had. Um, and I was privileged to learn so much from the 3,000 journalists that were working for Reuters at the time. And being publisher during a time where um, it was ushering in the age of information. As the collection and the dissemination of information was becoming cheaper and more widespread thanks to the internet and the applications on the internet. It became clear that every company, every business, every city in the world was in part a media company. Not just Reuters, but every city, every company, every region was in part a media company, which meant that all of us are in part are a publisher. And so I think having a publishing mentality, which is something that I think you guys are doing really well. Listen, again, I'm not sure I have any advice to offer based on what I'm seeing so far. One of the things that you guys are, I think, doing very well, which is a mistake that most, I think, storytellers are making as they try to adopt this publishing mentality. Most people rush to try to create as much content as they can, but yet they're not extracting the value out of the content and the stories they already have. And so I think the smartest first step that you can take, which is precisely the first step that you and Dan and team have taken in Buffalo, is to make sure that we're capturing the stories and we're telling them in the way that really does differentiate Buffalo, really, make sure to contextualize the story in a way that makes the most sense for the arc of the full story that you're trying to tell. You're not just telling that first bit of a story, which is always the what. You're also focusing on the so what and the what next for Buffalo and those that should be thinking about Buffalo. So my view is you're not rushing around trying to create a bunch of content. You're saying, what do we already have to work with? How do we wring all the value out of that? How do we make sure that we understand the arc of the full story we're trying to tell? How do we contextualize it in a way that people can appreciate not just what to read, but what to actually do with what they learned from what they read from you? And that to me is what I consider a publishing mentality. And it's certainly something that I think you're doing. And then just play to your strengths. And again, I think it's something that Buffalo is doing extremely well. And you see this through 43 North and the foundation. And now through some of the other things that the foundation is doing with the studio, Dan and team. How do we play to the strengths of what we already know and what we're good at? A very easy and obvious example for Buffalo is manufacturing, industrial. It's something that it runs in the bloodstream of the people. It's in the DNA of the city. There's so much been there, done that. One of the things that I'm hoping and I'd like to see happen as Series B expands beyond just B as in literally Buffalo, but also Western New York, is get into how much innovation we have, in Rochester in the area around vision and vision tech. Right. I mean, again, Kodak, Bausch and Lomb, so, the history of the science is from Western New York. That shouldn't be such a well-kept secret. I would think if you are an aligned startup in that space, there's no better place in the world to be than Buffalo and Rochester in the Western New York area. And so I think it's really understanding where you have a better than most opportunity to win and focusing on those areas and making sure that story is being told. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, we definitely agree that Buffalo's got a compelling story to tell, and appreciate that GrowthX is certainly a part of it. Now, through your partnership with the Golisano Institute and everything you've been doing to support local startups here.
Yeah. And we're doing our little part to also fuel the economy. We've added 2 jobs. We hired in Rochester. We're very proud to have one of the first graduates of the Golisano Institute. Ben Bastian is a full member of our team. Ben is, operating everything that we do and building our AI product. We're also proud, as you may have seen reported in Series B, to have hired Pat Schreckengast to be our managing director, based in the region, currently out of 43 North and soon to be the Buffalo building of the Golisano Institute. But it was important for us not to just be operating in partnership virtually. The region means enough to us. And we think that there's a significant opportunity. The conversations we're having with Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation and One Rock and others, we're very excited about what's happening in Buffalo. We think it's just begun. We feel very privileged to be a part of what's happening and to contribute our small part. And so I wanted to make that commitment and actually have an office in both cities and to hire a team and grow there.
Well, we are certainly lucky to have you and your employees. Saw Pat walking around the floor today, so I'll make sure to go say
he's awesome.
Hello up there. Yes, for sure. So I really appreciate your time joining us today. Before I let you go, we're ending on a segment that we call Last Call, which is a couple hard-hitting questions for you.
Do it.
So first, what is your favorite productivity tool right now?
Oh, I mean, my answer is so obvious. It's just, AI. I mean, I'm an open AI guy. I'm a ChatGPT guy. I'm starting to work with Claude, but I've just, I've gotten my habits all built into ChatGPT. So I use it all day, every day, in every single way. It helps me be better. It helps me think through things. It helps me to, outsource things that I already know how to do, but it can do faster than I can. So yeah, there's not even a close second in my book.
You're on a podcast right now. When you listen to podcasts, at what speed are you listening at?
It's a great question. It really depends. If I'm listening to one of my favorites, Lex Friedman, and he's interviewing a scientist, which is my favorite. I really love learning about the deep science behind AI. I love learning about neurology and biology and sociology. I love learning about the universe and the science behind all of it. I mean, it's definitely no faster than one. When I'm listening to colleagues that are, talking about a subject that I'm familiar with, like B2B sales, and I'm geeking out on that, I'll get up to 2, unless they're a naturally fast talker, which at that point I'll do a 1.5. Most of the time for those, I'm going to do 2x.
Good choice. What's your go-to coffee order?
Well, I don't drink coffee. I drink tea, and it's English breakfast tea for me.
All right, that works. What's a book or TV show that you would recommend to our audience?
So I'm a book guy, not a TV guy. And that's a hard question to answer because I just read so much. Listen, one of my favorite, I'm a historical fiction reader. I'm a character-driven fiction reader, novel. I would say The Count in The Gentleman in Moscow is one of my favorite characters in literary history. So yeah, Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles is a go-to book that I recommend.
Awesome. And then when you visit Buffalo, order 10 chicken wings. Is it drumsticks or flats? What's your preference?
I'll tell you, if we had more time, I'd tell you the full story, but I happen to be a vegan. And there's a couple of people in Buffalo who know this story. The last time I was in Buffalo, I decided I needed to have some buffalo wings. I've only been vegan about 3 years now. And so I've had my share of buffalo wings before, but I've never eaten buffalo wings in Buffalo. And I decided I was on my own. I'm going to go out and sneak a meal in that nobody's looking at me. I'm eating my chicken wings. And I went out and I did some research. And I won't name some names, but I found something that I thought, and ChatGPT helped me decide where I should try if I'm going to have one set of chicken wings in Buffalo. Where should I go? And I went there. I had reached out to some humans as well to say, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing. Where should I go and eat? And I didn't hear back from a couple of people. And I wanted to go and have dinner. So I went to this place and I'm eating. And literally as I'm sitting there eating my first chicken wing, I get a note from someone you and your audience knows, who's someone who's very well known in Buffalo, saying, oh, don't go to this place, go to this other place. And of course, I'm sitting at the place they're saying not to go to, and like literally eating my first chicken wing. And I will tell you that and this was the dead of winter, and I am not dressed appropriately from the South. I finished that plate of wings. I said, thank you, paid my bill, left a nice tip, walked to the next place. And it was a 20-minute walk. And it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences I've had in a long time. Sat down and ate a full nother set of chicken wings. And for me, it's
Wow.
flats.
Flats. 20 flats in one sitting. Yep.
Yes.
That's a fantastic story. I'm going to ask you about which locations that were.
Offline.
Those were after we stopped. Yeah,
Yes.
after we stopped recording. So thank you so much for your time and all your insights. We're super grateful to
Greg,
have had you on
yeah.
and like I said, have GrowthX in our community.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I mean, and I'm so grateful not only to be a part of the incredible work that you guys are doing, but Buffalo has been incredibly opening, inviting to us, and we just couldn't be more blessed to be a part of that community.
Great. Thank you.